Hello, I'm John Beattie. Welcome to Cask to Class, the whisky podcast, where we examine the heritage and flavour of Scotland's national drink and the world's favourite spirit. Today, we are talking to Gordon Dundas, who is in Advocacy and Development at Ian Macleod Distillers. Gordon, good to talk to you. Thank you for talking to us on Cask to Glass.
Not at all. Great to be here.
I know you're busy. I know you're going out to Lions tour as well later on, but let's start with the whisky. And everyone asks this question they have a different answer. How do you take your whisky when you're having a whisky?
Well, it depends. I mean, there is no rules, and that is my first thing. And, doing what I've been doing in this industry for 20 plus years now, I think the first thing to say is that you drink it the way you want to drink it. But if I'm in Scotland on a slightly colder evening, I think I'll have it straight. I lived in Taiwan for a year. It's hot in Taiwan. When I lived there, it was you have it with ice, or you drink it in a high tall drink because you need a bit of refreshment because it's hot. It's 40 degrees plus in the summer. So I'm an advocate of cocktails. I'm an advocate of straight. I'm an advocate of ice. I'm an advocate of anything. So as long as people are drinking whiskey in whatever way they want to, I'm very happy.
You mentioned Taiwan, and I was visiting friends in a caravan in a place called Moss Yard where Doddy Wee used to go back in the day. And her husband had a Taiwanese whiskey that had won gold. I know I'm jumping this on you. You might have no idea what it was. Really, really high proof Taiwanese whiskey. The Taiwanese whiskies are going places, aren't they?
Yeah, there's probably 3-4 distilleries over there. The most famous probably Cavalan, which was the first distillery.
It was a Cavalan.
There's another one called Omar.
Cavalan, yeah.
Cavalan produced some really good stuff. I mean, the challenge with whiskey over there is, well, it's not a challenge, it's just different, is it matures really fast because it's hot. So you 3 years old and you're really dark in colour and big flavours and big cask interaction and all of that type of stuff. But Taiwan is a really unique market because it's the only market in the whole world where single malt outsells blends by volume. So there's no other market like that. So Taiwan is an incredible whiskey market.
Does that affect you then, you guys? I mean, are you out in Taiwan a lot?
Yeah, we do a lot in Taiwan. To be honest, at the moment, Taiwan and China has slowed down a lot. The demand out there is softened. But we are still out there. We have our own business in Taiwan. We have Ian Macleod Taiwan, which do all of our distribution, and we also now have Ian Macleod in China. So we are owning our own distribution in these very strategic markets for us, which is in the long term the right move. So, yeah, having lived there, I love that country. I love their passion for our whiskies as well as just whiskies generally. So, yeah, they consume a lot.
I remember interviewing Lenny Russell on the radio, I think in the middle of lockdown. And he was, well, it can't have been that, but I think he was going across China in some very high-speed train. But he did mention that you were building a distillery or several distilleries. China, India, Taiwan.
Well, no, we built we have an operating distillery in China, to get the right country, India.
Wow.
So in the very north of India. So we've had a business in India for 20 plus years, which has been ticking over, making a nice little bit of cash here and there. And we, with that, effectively found a site and built a distillery in the foothills of the Himalayas. So we're going to have an Indian single malt. So probably in two years, I would think. So my colleague Ian Weir is actually heading out there on Saturday to have a look at the distillery and start to think about the brand and what it's going to look like. But yeah, distillery in India, and in 3 months' time we'll be up to 4 distilleries in Scotland. So that's exciting.
Well, tell me about that, the new distillery.
So the new one in India is called Una, and it's producing single malt spirit using Indian barley, water from the Himalayas, and obviously we're maturing it over there in the heat, so we're going to get that fast interaction, that fast flavour generation. So that's going to be one of our single malts in the future. We obviously have Glengoyne, which is the first distillery that became part of Ian Macleod. We have Tamdhu, which is all sherry cask and up on Speyside. We have Rosebank now, which is a very famous distillery in the west of Falkirk, in Camelin and Falkirk, and we are 3 months out having a distillery with the Isla boys on Isla, just opposite the airport. If you've ever been there, John, right opposite the airport.
I'm going there on Wednesday. I
Well,
know this is time-stamped. I'm going there for a funeral. Mighty Mouse Ian Macleod's
of course, yes, he
funeral
lived out
on
there.
Wednesday.
Yeah, he lived out there.
And I go to Isla every year.
Yeah.
So you're right opposite the airport.
Yeah, so if you're going out on the ferry, you may be going on the ferry. If you fly in, it's right in the middle of that road between Bowmore and Port Ellen, right opposite the airport. You cannot miss it. I'm sure it'll be named Terminal 2 by the locals.
That's a beautiful site, isn't it? I mean, of all the places to have a distillery, that's a beautiful site.
Yeah, so I mean, look here at Ian Macleod. There's plenty going on, and we've got a lot of work to do in terms of these new brands, as well as keep Glengoyne and Tamdhu doing what they're doing, which is great work for us. So it's exciting.
Tell me something. I looked up your CV, and for a while you were. I was at the Rugby World Cup in Australia in 2003. You were there selling the Rugby World Cup. What spun you from there into whiskey? What happened?
Well, I graduated as an engineer, so I did engineering for about 5 years.
Nothing wrong with that. So did I.
Yeah, and I was like, I mean, yeah, but this isn't me. I mean, it was like the best thing about being an engineer was that you finished on Friday at 1 o'clock. I mean, it was literally, that was the thing to look forward to for me. So I thought, what do I really want to do? And I started to have a look around. I spoke to a few people you and I probably know, and got a job working in Edinburgh for a sports hospitality company, which I worked for 3 years. Selling packages at Murrayfield, packages all over the world. And part of that was go to Australia and sell the Rugby World Cup. We'd become an official partner of it. And so I did that, and I came back from it, and I thought, look, it was one of those jobs that you think, this is the best possible. You get to go to sporting events, and you get to go to Wimbledon one day, and Henley Royal Regatta the next day, and you get to do this, and you suddenly realise after 3 years, you go, yeah, but it's like almost every weekend. Yeah. And as much as it's good fun, you're not there with your friends, you're there with clients. So you're a bit like, this isn't quite what I would... And after 3 years, I thought, time to move on. So I started to work for Scotland and Whisky magazine, and then got into the Whisky magazine side of it pretty quickly, and was working within Whisky magazine for 8 years, which got me into the industry. And you speak and meet so many wonderful people, which is why this industry is amazing. And then joined Bowmore and worked for Bowmore for which became Beam Suntory for about 6 years, and then came here to Ian Macleod. So I've been here for seven odd years. So it's that adds up to over 20 years in the whisky industry, which is quite scary.
We'll get back to that episode in a second, but the best free way you can support the podcast is just hit the thumbs up button on this video and subscribe, so you get new episodes every week. It also helps lots more people find the podcast, so thank you. In that time, I got a naive question, but what have been the best whiskies you've come across and you thought, you know what, that's a bit different?
I've got a few good stories about whiskies. I very much buy into the... I was in a store in America recently, and this lady was tasting a Glengoyne 25. And I said to her, you've got to imagine, you're not in a store. You're at home. You're in your favourite seat. It's late at night. This is what this whiskey does for you. You're drinking it. You're the place, or you're with friends. It's a celebratory dram or whatever. And she sort of said, "I'm trying to take myself there. You're not standing in an aisle of a shop, you know." And I really buy into that. So some of my best, when I worked for Bowmore, I had amazing tastings of Bowmore in the number one vaults with with Eddie McCaffer, and gold, white, and black Bowmore, legendary whiskies. I've drunk some amazing Glengoynes here, and some amazing Tamdhus straight from the cask. So there's lots and lots of sort of opportunities and things like that. But one of the best, I think, was when I was sitting beside a colleague of mine who's working here, a lady called Karen, and Julian Van Winkle from the Van Winkle bourbon family.
Dynasty.
Yes. And this is before Van Winkle had gone really silly price-wise, and rarity and scarcity. And he wasn't a big Scotch drinker, but he was a good friend of mine. And we were drinking at this awards dinner in Edinburgh, and there was a Balblair 38 on the table. So we poured this Balblair 38. And at that moment in time, which was probably about an hour or so, the chat, the everything, that Balblair 38 did not last very long. And I'll never forget the sort of time when I then went to see the Van Winkles in Louisville about a year later. And I'm sitting on their porch, and out comes a Balblair 38. I think it's the only distillery he'd been to in Scotland. It's the only single malt he's really ever drunk and enjoyed. And we were there sitting on his porch about a year later drinking Balblair 38 going, do you remember that night? Oh, yeah, I do. That was a great night. And whiskey for me that's what it's about.
Time and place.
Totally.
Memories.
Yeah.
You mentioned Glengoyne because I messaged you, said an Italian friend was bringing his pal, but I got the wrong date. So they've been, and they told me they had a great time. Good. Tell me about the place, because for Glasgow people, we would pass it in the car. This distillery beside the hill, Dumgoyne, where Gordon, another rugby player, Gordon Bullock, ran up and down it enough times to make the height of
Everest.
Mount Everest.
Yeah.
So tell me about that distillery and who comes, who visits.
Well, I mean, it's an amazing distillery because it's not huge. It's a pretty small site. It's out past Blainfield and just before you get to Killearn, and it's sort of poked away and people drive past it. But it's one of the most visited distilleries in Scotland because of its pretty close to Glasgow. You can get a bus. You don't have to, drive. So it does have a lot of visitors, and the amount of people that come who like it's their first and only whiskey distillery that they visit, people who are walking the West Highland Way, which is obviously just over the road and further down. It's a distillery experience which is brilliant from a novice perspective, or there are others experiences if you maybe have been to a distillery and know about the ingredients and how you combine them. Then there's plenty of other things that can keep you interested. So it is a fabulous distillery. It is a very picturesque. It sort of ticks that box of being to a Scottish whisky distillery, and it proves really, really popular. And the reviews we have for the tours are 4.8, 4.9 on TripAdvisor. So we're very happy with the experience there, and everybody loves it. And we've got a great team of people. The people there who work for us are so passionate and so good at doing what they do. So everybody has a great experience.
I love the idea, Gordon, of people walking the West Highland Way, which is 96 miles of hardship, stopping off for a whiskey.
Well, they do, and they're only about 5 miles in at that point.
I've got a friend who ran it. One of our neighbours ran it the other day. It's 96 miles. I think they have to do it within 24 hours. Is that right?
Can you run 96 miles in 24 hours?
He can. I mean, he's a whippet. But I don't think I've ever run. I can do 9 miles, never mind 96. So they stop off. So what, Tom, tell me, there'll be Americans listening, many Americans listen or watch.
Yeah.
And when you come to a Scottish distillery tour, one that's just outside Glasgow, what do you get? What happens? What's different?
So I think it's like everything. You can go in as deep or as not. And if you want to know the basics about what a distillery, how is whiskey made, we combine... it's different to what you would get in a bourbon distillery. It's a different style. It's 100% malted barley, water, yeast. This is what we do. Mashing, fermentation, distillation, maturation. That's the process. And then you'll taste some drams, and you'll go away with those little idiosyncrasies that make each single malt distillery a little different. Why is Glengoyne different to another one that you will go and see? If you go and see Auchentoshan, which is just near Glasgow as well, they do things differently, and that's why the whiskey ultimately is different. And remember that what I love about that is it's all about the diversity we have in Scotch, the 155 distilleries. Maybe a lot of them are new, but call it 120 distilleries we have in Scotch. That diversity of style, from Islay to Glengoyne to Glenmorangie to whatever, is all about historical blending. It's all about that whiskey being sold to blenders, and that's why we have that huge and beautiful diversity, whether it's geographical or taste. And Glengoyne fits within that. It fits within that really interesting story that it's actually in the Highlands on the north side of the road, but when you walk to the south side, you're in the lowlands. I like to say to people that is why the whiskey is so fabulous. It's matured in the lowlands and distilled in the Highlands, but it makes absolutely no difference. It's only...
Is it really right on the border?
Yeah, so the road
is the
tax line, not the Highland line, not the geographical line, the tax line, the old whisky tax line, where, that line between the Highlands and the Lowlands, which was really significant up until the sort of 1823 when they did the old Act of licensing or whatever, and that was really significant. But Glengoyne's been there since 1833, a former farm. Most distilleries were farms.
And as I said to my Italian friend, that's the furthest the Romans got, wasn't it? The Antonine Wall. And if you had a wee look over the Antonine Wall, you'd understand why they didn't want to go too much further. It's kind of rough old country.
Yeah, they didn't go a lot further. I mean, arguably, Glengoyne, I think, is a little bit more of that lighter lowland style as a general characteristic. But, the Highland region, the regionality of Highland whiskies is the most diverse of them all. So you have technically whiskies like, Highland Park is technically a Highland. There's ones in the north very different to Glengoyne, which is more in the South Highlands. So that huge area of the Highlands produces a huge diversity of styles.
Where do you think we are in terms of the whiskey world just now? Because it's plainly changed very quickly. There were lots of new distilleries being set up. Everyone's buying barrels, whiskey bottles were getting more and more expensive. And now you just get the sense there's something different happening. What's happening?
I think we're in a little bit of look, this is historically how Scotch has been. It's been a little bit boom or bust in the past, and I think we're just in a little bit of a dip at the moment. And I think there's I see a few green shoots here and there, which is great. But I just think there's a few things which are probably bringing that together. I think in most countries, interest rates are the highest they've been for 15 plus years. 17 years, if you think about it. They've all been at about 1% for about 15 years. And I think there's a whole generation of people that are used to 1%, and they're now 4.5. I mean, I remember when they were 15. So
15, yeah.
I think there's a bit of that going on. We're definitely in a post-COVID sort of dip a little bit around the world. I think if you think about, people that were sitting at home during COVID and trading up their whiskey because they had money to spend. They weren't going out. They weren't, and I think there's a little bit of that natural correction back down, which has then been impacted a little bit more by a feeling of just, generally we're in a bit of an uncertain world as well. There's a whole load of things I think that just maybe feed into it. But I think whiskey is that long-term, there's so many opportunities, even in the UK, in America, in India, China, in the longer term, that I think whiskey will be in a much better place in a few years.
I've not asked anybody about Russia. I presume the Russian market, was that a big market or not?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good market for us. It was, I think 5% of what we do, roughly. Significant. But we have not been supplying it since the outbreak of that war. And that's a very strong position Leonard takes. And, it's just something which we stand by as a business. And it's something that we have to deal with along with all these other. Being a sailor, I sail a bit. You can be sailing along on a lovely day, you get hit by a gust, and if you're prepared for it, you can deal with it a bit more. And that's sort of what this industry is like. You can be just sailing along quite happily, and suddenly something happens, something breaks in the boat, and the boat goes a bit. That's what happens in whiskey, and we're sort of going through a bit of a gusty period. But I think we'll be set fair in the years to come.
Where'd you go sailing? I don't know if you know a friend of mine, Clark Perry, who does
I know Clark very well. I've known Clark for about 30 years. I know his son well, who used to work in the industry, Dale.
Oh, really?
And I know Clark very well, and sort of laughs like that.
He has a great story about sailing off the west coast, and probably told you that pulling into a bay to anchor up, and he couldn't get his spot because there was another boat there. Mm-hmm. And he went a little bit further on, drops his anchor, takes his top off, starts sunbathing, and up pops Princess Anne.
Yeah.
So Princess Anne's on the next boat just as he's contemplating going nudie bathing. Anyway, so where do you sail? Just to get off.
I've sailed on the Clyde. I've sailed down south. I've sailed with Clark for many years. I've sailed with Yeah, we've got a lot of mutual friends in sailing and
Brilliant.
quite a social sport as well. I tend to like the social sports. I'm a big fan of rugby.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't play it obviously anymore, but quite like the social aspect of it. Skiing's quite social, quite enjoy that. Sailing's a bit like that as well, and I work in the whiskey industry. I mean,
I always say to people that one of the reasons these sports are good for you is that you can't be a complete idiot and be a great sailor.
No, there is that.
Or a great golfer, because it's too hard and rugby's too sore.
Yeah.
The wasters are kind of weeded out. They are, it's probably like American football. The wasters who tell you how good they are, they're weeded out. And likewise, whiskey is the same, isn't it? If you've got a good product, you can sell it, you're a good person, you've got to work hard.
Yeah.
You don't make money in whiskey just by saying we've got a great product.
No, it's got to be good, and that's why working for a family business is really important, because Leonard and take an approach of let's put the best possible liquid we can in the bottle, which is not, unfortunately, always the case, because certain whiskies are compromised by the channel you want to sell them in, or the the price point you want to reach, or if you have volume and all of these different things. Whereas we very much come from a business of, can we stand behind the quality of this liquid and talk about it and so you can introduce a whiskey and then you pour it to the whole lot of press and they all go, oh. That never happens for us. It's always which is good for me. It's generally this is great. Yeah, no, I love this. This is fabulous. So that's very much, your point rings true for sure.
I love telling the amazing story of Scotland's whiskey industry and sharing some positivity about one of the incredible things this country has given the world. Now, if you want to share some positivity too, leave us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening to the podcast. It takes you 10 seconds and will help Cast to Glass reach a much, much wider audience. You mentioned green shoots. I'm just wondering, where are they? Are the green shoots in maybe a slight concentration in terms of whiskey producing, or are there other markets coming that we like? I think we talk about India being a big market for the future. Where are the green shoots, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a very general sense, and I'm talking about the industry here, not us per se. I think if you look at wider Southeast Asia, there is still opportunity in wider Southeast Asia. China is still a huge country, and so China's very much is still an opportunity, although not great currently. And then you probably, where else is whiskey not sold? India, Africa, and South America. So those three areas, we sell a lot of blends and a lot of other things, but that natural sort of drippage of single malt into these markets is pretty slow. I think if you said to most whiskey companies, how are you doing in South America? If you're selling single malt, they'll probably go, we're not selling a huge amount. And that's probably true of Africa as well. And that's a very genetic, South Africa is different, but Nigeria, huge opportunity. And then, the other one is India, where we've seen a trade deal. We've seen 45, a halving of the tariffs, so it's still 75%, but that's better than 150. And I think India will be a slow burner, but we will start to see an improvement in the single malt Scotch figures and sales in that area, because India is really interesting because they drink whiskey. They drink molasses-based whiskey.
Yeah, they make their own.
Yeah, they make their own, and they sell huge amounts of it very cheaply, sometimes at the side of the road. But there is 400 million people who are what you would maybe call, I hate using this term, but sort of middle class, have some money, have some, and that's bigger than the whole of Europe. And it's bigger than America. And you think, well, it won't take, that much for maybe India in the future. So in the next 5-10 years to become, even if you get a small percentage of that, you will be in a good position. So, there's a huge amount of other markets which are difficult to deal with. South America and a lot of markets are difficult to deal with. And Africa is not easy either, with geography and all of that. But these are all opportunities for this industry, more so than probably one or two other industries that are like us, like rum, for example. So I'm excited about what's going on.
Who's been the strangest or the most famous person to come on a whiskey tour? Do you suddenly look up and go, oh my God, there's Sean Connery or whatever?
I'm trying to think. I don't do that many tours. I mean, I have met some quite interesting people in. I think one of the funniest was Joanna Lumley came to
She's great.
She is great.
She's a gem.
She came to Glengoyne to film I can't quite remember what it was, but to film a program for ITV. And my colleague Gordon Dundas was there. And he was quite, I mean, he still mentions it at every tasting, and he seems to have a short clip of when he was on ITV with Joanna Lumley. Yeah, look, I mean, wherever you go in the world, sometimes you see some really interesting people. I mean, I remember we found out one of the ITV newsreaders was a huge Tamdhu fan, so we sent her a bottle of Tamdhu. I mean, Martin Brundle in F1, huge whiskey fan. There's quite a lot of huge whiskey fans, and but the one thing you notice about Scotch is we don't overdo that celebrity. No. David Beckham and Haig Club is probably about the most celebrity it's been. We don't really overdo
Harrison Ford, Glenmorangie, that must have been a big spend, I would think.
I'm sure it probably was, or maybe he got a very old cask. But look, I thought that was a really nice series. I thought what they did was quite funny. It was quite sort of sarcastic and very, and I thought that
he bought into the joke, didn't he?
He did. I thought it was really good, but and I don't really buy into the criticism of it. Oh, why have you got a 80-year-old man promoting your whiskey? Well, just think of the fun of it and look at it for what it was, and don't overthink it. I thought it was really good.
Do you know the interesting thing about Joanna Lumley is I know her producer, a bloke called Ewan Thompson. Mm-hmm. He's from Mulgai.
Oh, is he?
So he goes around the world producing a program. So he must have brought her. It must have been his idea. She must have been doing some tour of Scotland, was she?
She was. Some ITV tour of something,
There we go.
Yeah.
Before we go, and we could extend this for a long, long time. When you produce different whiskies and you produce them for different markets, how do you find qualitatively, and quantitatively who's drinking them? And you mentioned middle class.
Yeah.
So is there a difference between somebody who drinks a single malt to somebody who drinks a blend? Is there a difference?
There's less of a difference than there was. So I think 20 years ago, a blend was an old man's drink, and in a general sense, and single malts were still a bit discovery for people. I think whiskey's just whiskey now, and blends, if they taste great, are fantastic. I mean, one of the things I do a bit when I go onto some of the auction sites and I buy blends from the 70s and from the 80s, because they were using amazing single malt in these blends. And as you taste a famous Grouse from back then, it would be very different to what it is now. It's still a great product now, but it would be very different. And so my whole thing is people should just drink whiskey. Blends, single malt. I don't like the phrase blended malt. It's not my favorite sort of term. But I think blends still play a role because they can bring people into the category at a price. Single malts are generally more expensive. And I just think, with the biggest thing about whiskey is its diversity, in Scotch. Bourbon, I've worked in bourbon. Bourbon is is in a boom time at the moment, but it's a little bit flattened off and probably starting to just soften a little bit. But I think bourbon has their taste profile is nowhere near as big as Scotch, in my view, or the diversity of Scotch. And blend fits right into that. And so you drink a really nice blended whiskey, 18 years old, and you taste it and you enjoy it, then it doesn't matter if it's a blend, it's just a whiskey. And the same with single malt. So I see we have these discoverers and these people who are looking to just drink great whiskey. They don't particularly care about the provenance. They're more interested in the business maybe behind it. Is it a family business? Is it not? A few other things, but they'll just drink really good whiskey. And I think one of the brands which I've worked for, which really shows you that, is probably a brand called Hibiki from Japan. It's a Japanese whiskey, very well known for its quality and very well blended whiskey, the art of blending, which Suntory are hugely into. And it's a blend which people talk about like a single malt, and it's lovely. It's hard to get at a decent price now, but I think it's for anybody, and the more that we can continue to drive whiskey for anybody, then that's great. One of the biggest things for people who drink or don't drink whiskey and then try it is they try it in a glass at 40% alcohol and they go, oh, it's quite strong. Strong wasn't the problem with the taste, it was the problem with the strength. So if you can, I'd love the highball drink, which is just whiskey and ginger ale or soda with a bit of, whatever in it, to be the gin and tonic of whiskey, and everybody to drink highballs. And I was saying in another thing recently, if Leonard said to me, Gordon, I want you to generate X million for me. I said, well, how would you do it? I said, well, I'd love to be able to find some really old casks and sell lots of old Glengoyne, but I'd actually prefer to say to you, over the next 10 years, I'm going to deliver that, but I'm going to build a brand that changes the attitudes of whiskey and gets everybody to drink highballs. And that will take longer to get to your 10 million. And that would be probably the route that I would want to take, and probably the business would take. So anything that gets people drinking more whiskey is fabulous. And all the people who work in this industry and my peers and the people who go out and talk about it are doing a really good job to widen that interest. But you can always do more.
Before we finish up, what would your call be to the Scottish and UK governments in terms of help? Because you're taxed, highly taxed.
Yeah. I think if we look at the UK, I would always support the SWA in terms of, this is your industry. Support it. Support it. It's not, I understand, the taxation take and all of that. But you're almost cutting your nose off to spite your face to a certain extent in terms of, we want to sell more whiskey to people who want to enjoy it responsibly. And, I'm like, well, can we just give us a break? Give us some way of making it easier. Brexit made it more difficult to export whiskey, not so much to distributors, but to individuals sitting in France who want to buy whiskey from us, for example. So, just one of those things is think about the people. It's a huge industry. There's a huge amount of people that support it. Let's just make it easier in a time that things are tough for this industry at the moment.
Gordon, that's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, pleasure.
We're never going home. We're never going home. Can we stay with you in Scotland for the rest of our lives? We're never going home. Never going home. All it took was one sip of the water